All right, everybody, we have a special guest on here on Fire Breathing Rob. This is Kathleen Dameron. She is in Paris right now. She left the U.S. at 18, and I'm going to let her tell her own story. But Kathleen, first of all, thanks so much for coming on the program. Greatly appreciate your time today.
Well, I really appreciate you reaching out. And, you know, it's 10 o'clock at night in Paris. So we managed to find something that works in our time zones.
Right.
So this is a great pleasure.
Kathleen, you are talking about 6 sessions right now and trying to transform white racism. So before we get into that, can you tell the viewers a little bit about you?
Okay. So Kathleen Dameron, I'm an African American. I was actually born in East St. Louis, Illinois. So in the Midwest. And East St. Louis has this fantastic reputation because it's one of the cities that had a race riot in 1919. And most Black people know this, and most white people don't know this, that when the soldiers came back from World War I, there was a whole series of race riots in the cities and in the countryside, white people killing Black people. White people in my hometown came into the city and they killed every Black man, woman, and child that they could find over 5 days with the help of the police.
Wow, I didn't even know that. See, this is the stuff that they don't teach in schools that, you know, no one knows about.
It was called the Red Blood Summer all through the South in the United States. In 1919, you had veterans who'd come back from the First World War to protect the world for democracy, who thought they were going to have some democracy here. And what did they find? They found the sharecropper system, where the Black farmer would take his crop and he would never have enough money to be out of debt. So they said, okay, we're going to put the crops on a train and take them to Chicago or a big city and sell them. And they murdered entire villages. One of the things they did in that Red Blood Summer is that you would have white people who would go to church with their arms, and then they would go to the Black church and they would kill every man, woman, and child in the church. Last year was the 100-year commemoration of that Red Blood Summer. And I'm sure most of your listeners, even if they're progressives and they're really into politics, I'm sure you didn't know that last year we were celebrating 100 years, commemorating of all of those deaths. In Arkansas, they killed. And of course, everybody now knows about Tulsa, Oklahoma, where in 1920, the Black Wall Street was attacked, looted, burned. And we'll come back to that, because when white people say, why are Black people looted? We go, wait a minute. Y'all looted us, burned us out, massacred us. Y'all looted us all of the time since Reconstruction. And you're gonna call us looting when we break a window and take one television? Since Reconstruction, when Black people got affluent, when you had a Black business that was doing well, when you had a Black city that was prosperous, they would get attacked, looted, burned, murdered, men, women, and children by white mobs with the help of the police, with the protection of the police. That massive, systematic murder, burning, looting of Black communities. So I come back, you compare that, and you have people protesting for racial justice, for not being killed, and they're protesting for not being killed, and somebody breaks a window instead of television, and people get so upset. Well, why didn't you get upset in 1918 and 1919 when they were massacring hundreds of Blacks in one city, East St. Louis, Illinois, where I came from, all through the South, the sharecropper South, so that Blacks couldn't go and sell their crops somewhere else. And in Arkansas, in Oklahoma, in Colorado, in Denver, Colorado. So that history y'all don't want to talk about. That word looting, you don't apply to white people who do that to Black people. So if I even go to the higher level, y'all need to look at the history. Americans need to learn what is the history of white mob violence against Black people with the protection of the police before they start opening their mouth and talking about something that's happening in a demonstration. And I feel really strongly about it. Yeah. And that's one of the things I'm doing in this program that I have, which is Transforming White Racism, is to realize that this hierarchy of races, you know, the white race, the yellow race, the red race, and the Black race, that didn't exist until the 1500s. Nothing talks about it before the 1500s. 1600s, you get this treaty that starts talking about the hierarchy of races, and it was invented to justify the genocide of the indigenous people in the Americas. Because I think it was in 20 years or 30 years time, between the time Christopher Columbus landed here and the early 1500s, they had gotten rid of 90% of the population that was there. So then they bring in Black people. And then they decided in 1619 that there not only be indentured servants, Black, that all Black people by color will be slaves. So you got this long history, and this long history is not something that white people or Black people learn in school. You don't learn about the genocide, you learn about Thanksgiving, we said thank you, yes, but then they all disappeared. We see the Western movies, and that's another thing that I'm getting, you know, people to say, if you really look at what happened, it was not individualist. You didn't go west by yourself. You got together a whole bunch of other people, a whole bunch of wagons. You got somebody to protect you. It was communitarian. And when you got to where you were going, everybody got together to help everybody build their houses. And you built a schoolhouse together, and everybody put in some money to have a school teacher. So we've been taught in school something about individual that does not correspond to how the West was won. And we talk about democracy and honorable, and the United States government has never, ever respected a treaty with the native populations, ever. And even today, they have a reservation in the middle of nowhere with nothing on it, and we want to put a pipe through it, and we kill the elders. The elders were killed so you could put a pipeline through their land.
Well, not even just that, Kathleen. You look at the COVID-19 cases, and they're extremely high, if not the highest in the country, on Native American reservations.
Yes, and I've been reading that the Navajos are actually in danger of disappearing. They have so much COVID-19 problems, and they don't have a hospital. I think the closest hospital is 100 miles away. Yeah. And I don't know if you saw this, but in Ireland, a long, long time ago, Indian chief sent some money to Ireland. I think he sent $19. And when the COVID crisis in the Navajo reservations became public knowledge, you had this whole movement in Ireland to say, they sent us $19, we need to send it back to them. And so you had all of these Irish people who were sending money to the United States, to the Navajos, so that they'll survive, so that they won't disappear. Yeah. I want to come back. I got this cross between, I come from East St. Louis, Illinois, which is a city of the race riots, and we never talk about the race riots. And in the program that I'm doing on transforming white racism, what I really get people to do is to say, we need to look at the history. And when you start to look at the history, the violence, the murder, the theft, the robbery, I said, if you look at that, I am sure a lot of white people don't want to see it because I feel ashamed.
Yeah.
You know, they feel ashamed, they feel uncomfortable, they don't know. It doesn't correspond to your history books. It doesn't correspond to your TV. It doesn't correspond to any of the stories. So you don't know. But at the same time, you know, because when you start talking to old people, it's somewhere there in the memory, but we don't want to remember. And I fundamentally believe that until we teach the history, till we learn the history, until white people can look at another white person and say, this is what we've done, we're not going to get a change. And the change comes about, the transformation comes about when we open up, open our eyes, open our ears and say, this police brutality, every year, 1,000 Black men, women, and children are killed by police in impunity every year. And this year, with all that's going on, with all the demonstrations, with everybody out there, you still had over 500 killed since January. So it hasn't changed. Despite all the demonstrations, it's not moving, it's not changing. And what is changing is that you've got more white people saying, oh, I'm beginning to hear what's going on.
Yeah.
You have more white people who are saying, oh, actually, 8.5 minutes with your knee on somebody's neck, that's cold. That's like real cold. And most people have trouble looking at it because it's brutal, it's cold. And I think it hits people more because when the policeman jumps out and shoots you, it's over fast. This was slow. This was crying. This was a grown man saying, mama. And most people say, when a grown man calls his mama, damn. So it's, in a sense, it's not even that another Black man died, is that you saw a slow, cold, brutal execution. And that touched people, and they were finally able to say it. And if we want a transformation, and this is my belief, this is the program I'm putting into place, this is what so much is happening around other people, because there are lots of people who are trying to transform this, is to say, white people, look at the history, not the one that they gave you in school, but what really happened. Let's look at the facts, look at the figures. Let's look at the memorials to the massacred cities. And when you start to touch that, I think you have a possibility that people will be willing to act to make a change. I'm American and I live in France. I'm sort of like, I feel deeply in my body being American and what's happening in the States, and wake up in the middle of the night and it's really in my body. It's really upsetting, but I don't live in the United States. I haven't lived in the United States since 1976. I would never live in the United States again. When I was in university, I went to university when I was 16.
Oh, wow.
And I was curious. I was in California. I left East St. Louis, Illinois, went to California. That was supposed to be a great place for Black people to be. It was so liberal and open and progressive. And I get to university and we have Black students whose family has given them nice cars to go off to school in. And they're scared to drive back on the weekend because they get stopped for BWD, black while driving. So all these young, they're 18, 19 years old, they're in college, family bought you a car, but if they bought you a car that's too nice, your life is in danger.
Yeah.
I was devastated. I'd come to California, I thought I had come to the most open, liberal, progressive part of the United States, and you still got this racism. And I was really depressed and upset about it. And when I was in university, I had a French advisor. And okay, so I'm talking to her and I'm beginning to see that there are other places in the world. And I don't think Americans realize How often you say it's the world's greatest democracy, it's the best country in the world, it's the greatest country in the world. From an outside point of view, Americans say it so often in so many situations, it's like we're trying to convince ourselves. But we don't say on what criteria we base that decision. So I'm 17 years old. I go to this Black Leadership Conference. Now this is great, okay? I've been really upset because California is not Nirvana like I thought it was gonna be. I'm at a Black Leadership Conference, you know, I'm 17 years old and I'm with all these big, powerful people who know. I remember one presentation. The life expectancy of an African-American man in the city is less than that of a third world country, less. And it's not any better 30 years later. And I'm like, okay, I want to go see somewhere else in the world. I want to go somewhere. I had never lived outside the United States. And I said, I want to go to Paris. Now, I come back to my East St. Louis riots. Josephine Baker. You ever heard of her, Josephine Baker? She was a star in France. She was a star for 40 years. She's really, really known by all the French people for her musical talent and her dancing. And she was in St. Louis at the time of the race riots, and she was so scared. She said, I got to get out of the United States. And she came to Paris, and she was in the Negro Review, which was all of these Black musicians and Black actors, and all these Black people who thought that France was fantastic because they could go where they wanted to go. They could go to cafes, they could go to restaurants and hotels, and she could become a star and be revered and praised by French people, even though she was Black, because they could appreciate it. So I followed Josephine Baker and came to Paris. It's a beautiful city, and it's a place which is racist, but it's not anywhere as racist as the United States. And you don't feel this police brutality. You don't have to feel like you got to be careful. You don't have scared in your back that you're gonna get stopped while driving and somebody's gonna shoot you. You don't have that fear of police brutality that is so common in the United States, and so many Black people, no matter what your socioeconomic level is, you're scared. Mm. And so you feel more relaxed here. I feel more relaxed here. I don't have that fear. So I look at the United States and it's like, when are white Americans gonna realize, they talk about being scared of Blacks. We're scared because we get killed. So can y'all relax and stop shooting us?
A lot of people on, and I feel like it's more people that are in their teens, that are in their 20s, 30s, maybe early 30s. They go on Instagram now and they just put a black picture, like it's just a black screen, and they write Black Lives Matter. And I support that. But my thing to them is, if you just put a black screen up, or you just say, I support Black Lives Matter, that really doesn't do anything. It's, do you go out and vote? Do you go out and protest? Do you actually do any kind of advocacy for not just Black people, but for policies that you believe in? With me, it's Medicare for all. With it's homelessness and stuff like that. So what do you think about that? Do you think that that's really doing anything, or are you with me that that's kind of just like silly, actually?
I'm going to be more diplomatic.
Okay.
And I'm going to say, if you go on your Instagram account and you put that black thing, okay, you want to do something. Yeah. But there are also, you've done your first step. You said I'm open. Okay. You can go, for example, to janeelliott.com And she has a list of things that you can do. You can go to Color of Change. There are so many places that you can go to, and they'll give you a list of things to do. So you've made your first step. It's sort of like, okay, I've come out of the closet. All right. I now know that Black Lives Matter. So what am I going to read? I need to read something. I need to look at some programs that tell me about Black history and Black life. Maybe I'm going to read Stamped. Maybe I'm going to go and, go to YouTube and see what are the videos that I can look at. I'm going to see if there are any Black organizations. Is there a Black Lives Matter next to me? Because Black Lives Matter always has lists of letters that they need written, because they need you to write police stations. They need you to call police stations. They need you to talk to the district attorney. So, oh, do you like writing letters and sending emails? There was this wonderful campaign that I heard about where apparently there were a whole lot of young liberal people who enrolled to go to the conference in Tulsa that the president had, and that they contributed largely to him thinking he was going to have 1 million people because they had all these false things, and they just did a lot. It's just something you can get involved in. Maybe you can start, doing some little videos where you actually talk to Black people and ask them what they're interested in and show your friends. So I'm going to say, okay, you came out of the closet. You're not in the dark anymore. Yeah. What's your next step? And if you don't know what your next step is, there are so many places that'll give you lists of things to do. Little ones, writing, talking, videos. There's so many different things you can do to contribute to other white people knowing the story, opening their eyes and their ears. What's the history? What's really been happening? And how we're going to change it.
Kathleen, thanks so much. And this was Kathleen Dameron, and she's going to be on again for sure. And I really loved your insight. And it's really, hopefully, I guess I should say as we end, hopefully people learned about a lot of these things. Hopefully people look up 1919 and see what happened. And also look for your Black history in general. It's not just Martin Luther King, I had a dream speech. It's Martin Luther King. We look at the Poor People's Campaign, which was a huge thing that a lot of people don't even talk about. And I believe if he lived and he really completed all that, the Poor People's Campaign, that would have been really huge for this country. I think it would even have been, personally, been bigger than the I Have a Dream speech, because that Poor People's Campaign not only touched on Black people, it touched on white people and Native Americans. And that, I feel like with that happening, that would have really made America come together, because we're really far apart right now. I don't know if you have a quick take on that Poor People's Campaign, Kathleen, before we go, but.
I have a quick take on just the fact that poor white people and poor Black people don't have, excuse my language, they don't have a pot to piss in, right?
Right.
And the white person, he says, yes, but I'm white and I can go beat up a Black person whenever I want. That's all they got. But if they actually came together, yeah, they could say, hey, I want fair housing, fair education, and healthcare. And then they would both have a pot to piss in.
Sure. Hey, thank you again for this. It means a lot.
Thank you very much.